Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're joining from. Welcome, kalos ήρθατε, bienvenidos, benvinguts, tervetuloa, to the third and last day of the AI Thought Conference organized by the AI Localization think tank. After 2 days packed with information and insights that have been described as, and these are not my words, these are our audience reactions, memorable, full of quotable citations and fresh ideas that have not been chewed over and over in the past 3 years. We have arrived on our last session called Technology, which I'm thrilled to be moderating today. My name is Stavroula Sokoli, and I'm a member of the AI Localization think tank. And if it's your first time with us, feel free to browse more about who we are, what we do, and what our goals are. But if you allow me to say just 2 words, we're a group of experts and very kind humans who feel that fear and anxiety can go away with knowledge. And this knowledge has to be shared. We also share the belief that there is not only one view that is the correct one, and that this is a multicultural world and a multilingual world, of course, and that different points of view, different lights are necessary to illuminate the full picture of whatever we're looking at. So today, I'm looking forward to sit here and listen to the lineup of experts in technology we have for you, starting with Ben Hylak, the founder of Raindrop. It's a real pleasure to introduce Ben Hylak to you. But before I say anything about him, let me share something. It's public knowledge. So if you're wondering who this guy next to Ben is, this is a picture from many, many years ago. This is the 44th President of the United States. They're at the White House. And he's presenting Ben with an award for Ben's invention. It's a robot called Maya, Me and You Anywhere. And it was designed to help elderly people in nursing homes see and speak with their families as if they were physically present. So Ben has been working in communication, a very human issue, trying to solve it in a very technical way. So he's been in this since he was very, very young. That project took him to an amazing path from robotics to working on human interfaces at Apple and to founding Raindrop, a company focused on making AI systems more observable, more reliable, and ultimately more trustworthy. So there's a consistent thread in his path, how humans connect, communicate, and make sense of an increasingly complex world with complex systems. So even though Ben doesn't come from the localization field itself, his work sits right at the core of our field. What we're trying to do is the same, make communication possible and meaningful, and mostly trustworthy. Trust is a key word we have been talking about in this conference from the very first day. Ben, we're truly delighted to have you with us.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm really excited to be here. Awesome. I'm really, really grateful to be here today. Yeah, as you can tell from the introduction, I sort of don't belong here, right? And I don't mean that in a self-deprecating way. Like, I mean it very literally. I come from a very, very, very different world in a lot of ways. Um, I live in San Francisco, like right in the zeitgeist of it all. Um, I build AI products. I know a ton of people at OpenAI. Like a lot of my like closest friends are like at those companies. My investors are the ones that are backing those companies. My it's like I know the people training the models. Um, my industry is like mostly on Twitter or X. I think a lot of your industry is more on like LinkedIn, and beyond like those kind of things, it's like I think there's a lot of differences in the culture as well, right? Like I think that where you all think a lot in terms of nuance and context and cultural sensitivity, and that's sort of what you're living and breathing every day. We think more in terms of shipping fast, moving a number in one direction or another, scaling things up to billions. You guys are thinking about the tone in a specific dialect of Indonesian, and my whole world is worried about like shaving 200 milliseconds off of an API request. Sorry, let me go here. I think that the most important cultural difference, though, and the thing that you really need to understand about Silicon Valley is that we're a culture built on exponentials. So, like everything that Silicon Valley, San Francisco thinks about, does, invests in, it's all about things compounding exponentially. It's all a bet that they will continue to compound exponentially. So, this is a graph of like Moore's law, right? So there was this idea, 60 years ago that the number of transistors on a chip would double every 2 years. So again, this is 60 years ago. And it's just continued to be true for 60 years. And it turns out like, even if you just start with like 2 transistors on a chip, if you can double it every year, you go from 2300 in 1971 to I don't even know how many zeros are here. It's like thousands of times more, millions of times, billions, whatever that number is. Venture capital, right, is also built on these power laws. It's like most investments are going to fail, but like one of your investments is going to do return 1,000x, and that's the whole game. I think that when you live inside of that, when you're thinking about those exponentials long enough, you start to develop an almost intuition for it that I think most people, it's a very like unnatural thing. Most people do not think about exponentials. And it's like a very deep, I mean, you might think about it, but I mean that the actual growth itself is deeply unintuitive. It's not like a normal thing we encounter much. Like it feels very, very, very slow at first. And then it's just like by the time you notice, it's already past you. I think that AI itself is on that same kind of curve. There's a research organization called Meter, and I think that it can be hard to try to get tangible about like, well, how is progress of AI changing? I think one interesting sort of benchmark to look at is essentially the length of a task that an AI can complete autonomously. So in 2019, the best model could handle tasks that would take a human essentially like 4 seconds. By 2023, that shot up to 6 minutes. Today, as of like this year, and literally like the past few months, like Opus 4.6, for example, that was like is approaching like an hour. And so what you see is that essentially the task that how long of a task the model can complete autonomously is essentially growing. It's growing exponentially, right? It's doubling every 7 months. So if this trend continues, AI agents are going to be capable of completing tasks that currently take humans a few weeks. Now, will it continue? Like, no one knows. But like when you start looking at this curve, it's the sort of thing you start betting on. And that's the lens I'm looking through today, right? So everything I'm going to talk about, like that's the lens I'm looking through. When you're looking through that lens, it's like the title of the talk is like the next 5 years is almost comical, right? Like ChatGPT didn't exist 5 years ago. It came out 3.5 years ago. And in that time, we saw AI go from like party trick, like completely make up who the president was, to something that's actually rewriting entire industries, including mine, right? Like I think that software engineering is going through a crazy transformation right now. I can barely predict, the next 6 months. 5 years is just, it feels right now like completely unpredictable. So I think most of what I'll talk about today is really about the next 2 years and maybe less. So we have some cultural differences, you and I. But I think the reason I was invited was not necessarily because I understand your culture. It's not because I understand every bit of nuance about the work that you all do, but because I don't. Because I think sometimes the most useful perspective is someone standing outside of the thing you're standing inside. And so I guess, think of this a little bit like a cultural exchange. I'm going to tell you what the world looks like from where I stand. Some of it will be uncomfortable, and I won't apologize for that, but I will just be honest. And I think you'll find that what I see from my side and what you know from yours actually converge on something important. After I'm done talking, I'll take questions. I think that'll be a really great opportunity to like dig into this for people to tell me where you think I'm wrong, what I missed. So there will be that time, and I really appreciate that. So I'll also tell you why this is personal for me. So my mom was a translator. Her name is Hylak. She's here. She speaks four languages fluently: English, Spanish, Portuguese, and Russian. I grew up watching her obsessed about translating books and just like the meaning of a word. She's one of the most intelligent people I've ever met. It was not her task was not one that felt robotic. You know what I mean? It felt deeply human, extraordinary. Watching her, do court interpreting, for example, was just insane. And yet, like, I think that even before LLMs, translation was one of the first careers where we started to see, really serious impact from AI. Not like fully, not perfectly, but enough that the economics started to change, enough that the industry started being transformed. She's actually the one who told me to frame this talk as like a sort of cultural exchange. She said, these people understand culture, introduce yours. So, I'm listening to my mom for once and trying to do that. Okay, so let me tell you what I actually do, and then we'll kind of talk about the next few years. So I'm the CTO and co-founder of a company called Raindrop. And so we're what happens after AI gets deployed. So we monitor AI agents in production for some of the fastest growing companies in the world, like Replit, Speak.com. And we automatically detect when they have issues and we notify them. So we can tell them what the most important problems in their product is, where they're messing up, where they're accidentally deleting a database, deleting user data. It's really important because when AI products fail, and they do fail, right? We've all seen them fail. They fail silently, usually. There's not like an error that gets thrown that a developer could see automatically. So it's just like terrible advice or hallucinating an answer to a legal question. mistranslating something, or responding to a question about enterprise software with a rant about white genocide in South Africa, which actually happened, believe it or not. We work with some of the fastest growing companies in the world, and I think what we see across all of them, is the same thing, which is that the models are getting smarter, but these problems are actually getting harder, not easier, harder. As AI products get deployed into higher and higher stake situations, the cost of mistakes go up. Right now, I think there's a lot of sort of leniency around mistakes that just won't exist as we go into the future. I'll come back to that. So let's talk about what's coming. I'm going to give you 3 predictions, and I'm not going to sugarcoat them. So the first is that I think that most translation will be fully automated within the next 2 years. So you might already know this. It might be a shock, but I want to be specific about what I mean. So I don't mean AI-assisted translation. I don't mean post-editing. I mean that for the majority of content types, so like technical documentation, support articles, UI strings, routine business communication, I think a human will not touch the translation at all. Not for editing, not for review, not for quality assurance. It will go directly from source language to target language and ship. I think this is already happening. In 2023, roughly 25% of enterprise translation volume was machine translation with no human review. By early 2026, credible estimates put that number above 40%. Within next 2 years, I think it'll easily be above 80%. I think that, again, when you think of exponential growth, these are the sort of curves that I look at, that I think of, and I think it feels obvious, like what happens next. I think the economics are really brutal, right? It's like a human translator is 20 to 25 cents per word. Neural machine translations, a fraction of a penny. It's just like, it's an order of magnitude different, right? And we've seen significant jumps in multilingual capabilities for models already. And yeah, I think it's important to say really clearly, because I do think people in the AI world like do sort of dance around it, right? Like I do think that jobs will get lost. I do think that like real skilled human jobs, and not just this industry to be clear, but I think many industries, I think that it's already happening, and it's not a hypothetical, right? Like that's sort of the trajectory. I'm not saying that to be cruel. I'm saying it because I think that the worst thing I could do or anyone could do is just come here and just say, everyone's, there's, everyone in the whole world is going to be okay. It's like, no, actually, like a lot of industries will be hugely impacted. So it's not actually unique to translation. So I do want to be really precise about what I just said, though, right? So I said, I'm talking about translation. I think that there is a lot in your world that is not translation. There's, for example, there's interpreting, real-time, in-person, high-stakes interpreting. Super different problem. Cultural consulting, transcreation, regulatory adaptation. Those are like very judgment-heavy, context-heavy tasks where the human isn't just converting words, they're actually making decisions, right? That work is extremely real, and it's valuable, and it's harder to automate. For now, right? I won't pretend that I know how long, for now lasts. But today, if you're, as much as you can shift the work you're doing to being something that is not, essentially like you could be directly replaced with an API, text in, text out. Like, I think you're in a meaningfully different position than someone doing like, high volume translation. I mean, so prediction number 2 is that, and this is an important point, is that right now the big AI foundation labs do not really care about localization quality, but they will very soon. So I think this may or may not surprise you. So I spend a lot of my days working with the same teams that are building frontier AI models. I talk to people at OpenAI, Anthropic, DeepMind, And it's just like, it is not, localization quality is not a priority for them. It's not really barely on the roadmap. I think these labs right now are engaged in an intelligence arms race. They're spending billions of dollars to push, coding and math benchmark scores higher, make models reason better, write better code, pass harder tests. Right now, a lot of the multilingual capabilities are an afterthought. But think about what that means for a second, right? The models that will power every product on Earth, every customer service bot, every medical assistant, every educational tool, they're being optimized primarily for English-speaking people. And I think it shows. So actually, if you look at Anthropic's own documentation, they're published. This is their own published benchmarks for Claude, one of the best models in the world, right? So first of all, they make English the baseline 100%, which is a statement in of itself. Spanish, French, German, they're all in the high 90s, above 97. But then look at down the table, like Japanese, 93.5% on their smallest model Haiku. Swahili, 78%. And even if you look at the difference between Swahili and English, almost 10% of a difference on Opus 4.1. Again, they haven't. These are older benchmarks, so this is an older Opus model. And when you look at Yoruba, so this is a language that is spoken by 47 million people. It's 52.7% on Haiku. It's literally just like a coin flip. So it's just making stuff up in Yoruba. And here's the thing, like these are Anthropic's own numbers on their own benchmarks that they chose to publish. This is like the best case of the story. I think the real world performance with cultural nuance, a lot more context dependence. Also, once you integrate it into products and have a huge variety of different system prompts, I think this problem will get a lot worse. This is not like a translation problem. I think this is primarily a values problem. It's like what the labs care about right now. And it's a gap that will become a crisis. So here's a data point that I think should, terrify everyone in AI. You have 1.5 billion English speakers in the world, but there's 7.9 billion people. So that means, but sorry, about 60% of all internet content is in English, and only about 16% of the world's population speaks English natively. And so this is a huge gap, right? When these models get deployed into healthcare in India, banking in Brazil, government services in Nigeria, and they will be deployed there because the economic pressure is irresistible. The failures are going to be spectacular, not like oops, that's a funny mistranslation, like it kind of feels now. But like real failures, misdiagnosis, fraud, legal liability, people getting hurt. And once that happens, which it will happen soon, the labs will suddenly care quite a bit, very urgently, very, very desperately. So third prediction is just that the last human job is monitoring machines. And this is a big one. And I think about this a lot. In 1952, Kurt Vonnegut wrote a novel called Player Piano, which is about a future where machines do all the meaningful work. So essentially the humans who remain are there to monitor the machines, or they're engineers. Essentially, those are the two jobs left, is managers and engineers. So the machines are monitored by engineers who are monitored by managers. And so in this book, monitoring is humanity's last problem. And I used to think that was really dystopian, but I think it's just accurate now. So here's why. I think that as AI agents get more capable, they don't actually have fewer problems. They have more. And at Raindrop, we kind of call this the double whammy of increased capabilities. So the first part of this whammy is that more capability means more complexity. So if you think about like, oh, if you have just a model that can translate text, it has limited surface area, right? It's way easier to text, given this input, make sure it returns that output. But when you have a model that can translate text, but also write code and also interpret requirements, and now it's thinking and reasoning, and it's generating images that are matching. You start to approach just infinite ways that something can go wrong. There's no way to write enough test cases ahead of time. The only way to actually catch these failures is to watch them in production with real users. And the second is that, kind of as I referred to earlier, I think that more capability means higher stakes. So these increasingly complex, hard to test systems, they're being deployed as we speak in some of the highest stakes environments you can imagine. Like in Utah, an AI product got authorization to start prescribing medication autonomously without the intervention of a doctor. People are going to them for medical advice, legal counsel. And this is kind of hitting the entire world right now. Higher stakes, more complexity, less predictability. That's the trajectory we're on. And so our job is, making sure the machines don't screw up, finding the failures that engineers didn't anticipate, understanding not just whether the output is technically correct, but whether it's right for the context, right for the culture, right for the human on the other end. So let me sort of connect these predictions. So I believe the translation, as you know, is being automated. The labs don't care about quality yet, and the last job standing will be some form of monitoring, giving feedback to the models. I think here's what I think it means, for your industry specifically over the next year. So through the end of 2026, I think we see that pretty much the volume-based translation work moves entirely to machines. Post-editing work shrinks really fast. Traditional LSPs that haven't invested in AI will just struggle or consolidate. I think there's a world where most of I would imagine a lot of LSPs will consolidate. If your value proposition is like, I convert text from language A to language B, you're competing against a machine that costs 1/100th of what you do, and honestly, has the whole of human knowledge, at least what's available on the internet, which again we just talked about is limited, but has deep electrical engineering experience and philosophy experience and all these things. So it has all of that sort of knowledge. And I think that if you're competing directly with, again, text from language A to language B, you will probably lose that race. And I don't think that that's a 5-year thing. I think it's happening right now. In 2027, though, I think we're going to see kind of two things start to happen at once. First is that the quality crisis hits. So I think we're going to start seeing major brands get burned by AI-generated content. I think that could happen this year too. These things can always happen faster. But we're going to see more lawsuits specifically about this. There are laws, there are regulations that people are not following right now when it comes to you probably should have, be able to prove that you give equally good medical advice in different languages. And we're going to see huge PR disasters at a massive scale embedded in products that people depend on. Second, and this is also really important, I think we're going to start to see probably coding benchmarks start to saturate. And by saturate, what I mean is that it will get sort of good enough, or either it makes a huge amount of progress from where we are now, or it sort of starts to plateau. But at some point, coding is going to feel solved in the next year, at least solved for now. And the labs are going to start looking to squeeze out everything that comes after. And I think one of the remaining biggest gaps will be multilingual and cross-cultural performance. I want to be really clear. I think that a lot of the current gaps are not a fundamental limitation of the model. I don't see any reason why they would be. I think I'm saying this as a software engineer, right? Who kind of thought that my industry was, one of the hard, ones to require the most intelligence and the most, at least I would think these things, to myself. But then, you start to see models get better and better and better and at doing it. And so I think it's a lot of it is just an investment thing. And I think in 2028, the labs really start trying. Between 2027 and 2028, I think you're going to see models get dramatically, dramatically better, if not perfect. Just like we've seen coding ability jump over the last 2 years. And at that point, I honestly don't know, right? I don't know 100% what's left there for you or for me. I'm not going to stand here and promise that, translators become, the cultural quality engineers and everything works out. It could happen. It might not. What I do know is that AI will handle translation. Whether humans still got to handle the judgment, sort of depends on how things shake out, how the economics justify it. And for high stakes, high value, content, I think probably yes, right? Like I think humans will still be in that loop. And for everything else, I really don't know. So I think let's make it concrete, right? So at Raindrop, we detect when AI agents fail. So that's my job. Things like hallucinations, refusals, loops, frustration. And we do this by looking at signals, right? Not just whether the output is technically correct, but whether the user got what they needed. Now imagine, applying that to multilingual AI, right? A system that asks, it's not just checking is this grammatically correct Spanish, but it's really, is this communicating what was intended? Did the user's culture change the meaning? I do think that this is something that just like programming, agents will eventually be able to perform that loop themselves. They'll be able to learn from mistakes. I don't know exactly when or how, but they will. And I think that's kind of what exponentials do, and that's what they show. Okay, let's skip forward a little bit here. So this is my mom's quote from my mom before, as like, again, asking her before this talk is, she said, when I told her I was giving this talk, and kind of we sort of debate things a lot, and I think every time I talk to my mom, my how I think about things changes a little bit. But she said, don't insult people, tell them their careers did, but don't lie to them either, right? And I think I am trying to walk that line. And again, this isn't like a unique translation thing. I think it's something the whole world is thinking and struggling, trying to process right now. So here's what I honestly believe. I believe that the skill of understanding how meaning travels across cultures, I think that's real, right? I think it's deeply human. I can't promise you that the market will pay for it the way it used to. There's a lot in software engineering, and the market will not pay like it used to. I can't promise you that everyone becomes a cultural consultant and lands on their feet. Again, it's happening to my field too. Like software engineering in the last month, most engineers stopped writing code entirely, really. Barely edit code manually. We call it manually, which is crazy, but like, yeah. And that was something I could not have even imagined a few years ago. What I can tell you is that the world is about to deploy AI into every language, every single culture, every single market, every single product on earth. These models are going to make mistakes, really serious mistakes. And right now, most people building AI products don't even know what they don't know about languages and the cultures that those products will operate in. So that's a gap. Whether or not it becomes your opportunity depends on whether you move towards the problem fast enough. And that's not in 5 years. It's like it's happening right now. Thank you so much.
Wow, thank you. Thank you, Ben. Thank you so much. Very sobering. But I have to be honest with you, a lot of what you said many of us already know, and we are trying to not, but it's different when you hear it, from the outside as well. We have some questions, but before I go to Belen, I'm going to take advantage of my position and make one little comment and then ask you a question. The comment I want to make has to do with those percentages you showed us before. I think that your prediction for 28 is actually already happening in 2026. Is something where you showed that 80% is machine translation, AI translation, and then 20%. 20% for humans is a lot. 20% of 100 is not a lot. But 20% of a lot of content is a lot. It's much more than humans can handle anyway. So if it's true, if it's 20% is excellent for us. We just have to make sure that we are placed where this 20% is, and make sure people know about us and where to find us, and be there, not competing with AI. Definitely not. We already know that. We have been in this much earlier than developers. Neural machine translation since 2017 has been rocking our industry, and I think we could talk to developers with this experience we have as developers talk to us. But I don't think they care a lot and about localization and about the nuances and all that. What I want to ask you doesn't have to do with localization, and I'm sorry for the audience, but I think it's a unique opportunity to talk to someone who is actually at the table with people like OpenAI's Sam Altman. I saw this video. You were at the town hall a couple of months ago, and you asked a very good question. And you so elegantly told Sam Altman that their GPT-5 was actually worse in text writing than GPT 4.5. But even though it's better in coding, and he actually admitted the thing that was very good, and it was very good for us for so we can see all these spikes, what's happening, and I wanted to ask you if you can tell us about this feeling of being there with people who don't care about breaking things. They just, and sometimes some of them talk about their visions, but they're not very clear about that. And they have been accused of not being very clear about what the world will look like after all those visions they have are materialized. If they achieve all these goals, where are we? So that's what I wanted to pick your brain on.
I think that the way I see the world is like there's this thing called like Hanlon's razor, and it's that never attribute to malice like what can be equally explained by incompetence. I think that there's something there. Like I think that we are in one of the fastest moving industries that has ever existed in human history. Not even one of, like, I think definitively the fastest. Like I mentioned how ChatGPT didn't exist. Like it didn't even seem like something that could exist 3.5 years ago. And so there's not a lot of preparation that goes into, like even actually when it was launched as a just an experiment, right? I think, I'm not sure how many folks know that, but it's a weird name, right? Like you can kind of tell it wasn't, deeply thought about. ChatGPT, what even is that? It was just a random experiment that happened to go very, 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 very well. And so, and then, like I mentioned, OpenAI did release a model a few weeks ago, 5.4, which is actually much better at writing and is also better at coding. I think that it's a combination of things. Like I think that a lot of the people working on the model aren't very good at writing, probably is like maybe part of it. Sometimes they just don't care. Like because of how important solving, in their or ending, my industry is, I think that they will take sacrifices anywhere else if they happen. Not necessarily like they have to happen, but just a speed prioritization. What is the content that you're paying for to train on, right? Like right now, programming data sets are worth a lot of money because they can't get enough of them. And so it's really, at the end of the day, is that it comes down to how they're prioritizing. And I think right now they're prioritizing software engineering.
Yeah, actually, people are talking about that many translators are sitting in a gold pot of money that they don't know they have very good quality data, especially those with a lot of experience, a lot of memory tools. I want to give the floor to Belen, who is going to take questions from the Q&A for you.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you, Ben. That has been an amazing talk. Everyone is praising you on the chat, so thank you so much for that. We have tons of questions actually, so let's see if we can go through all of them. There is actually a couple of questions that are similar that talk about what are the skills that folks in the globalization industry acquire today and will live over the next 5 years, but more like general question apart from the specific skills is that one that I saw in the chat. From your point of view in your industry, what is the most important role for humans? So when all this happens, what is the most important role for humans?
So I think one thing that was sort of counterintuitive was we look at like AI and how it's affected software engineering so far. I think that there was my sort of naive belief would have been that it will be an equalizing force. That means like every skill level of software engineering, sort of like the differences between the most junior engineer and the most senior engineer collapse. I think that so far we've seen the opposite of that, actually. As someone that is like hiring engineers, I really have seen the opposite, which is that bringing in someone with 15 years of experience, AI gives them so much leverage to move insanely fast and essentially have like 10, and I mean this literally, like almost like 10 junior engineers working in the background. Again, I don't mean an exaggeration. I mean, like if I had to choose between 10 junior engineers and one engineer with 15 years of experience, I would just choose the one that has 15 years of experience. That number actually might even be higher. Like it might be 23. I don't even know what the number is. So that there's, I think, something there, which is that like AI gives people with deep expertise in a specific area, a specific domain, a lot more power than they had before. So in some way, just like having expertise is actually probably something that will be useful for now. I think you want, kind of like what I mentioned in the talk, is like you want to be not the middleman in something. Like you don't want to be in a position where you're taking text in, text out. As much as you can be on the ground with people, as much as things can involve human relationships, like I think these are going to be the things that just matter more and more as time goes on.
Okay, thank you so much for sharing, Ben. The next most voted question is, at some point you talked about AI companies don't care about localization quality yet. So Christina is asking, at what point would you predict that AI companies will actually start focusing on localization quality, and across what kind of parameters?
I think once they need to. So I think that like again, it's really just prioritization thing. Like, what does they need to mean? It could be legislation. It could be regulatory things. That probably should be something that exists in that realm. Not even just in localization, but just as a whole, right? Like there probably if your product is giving medical advice, probably it should have to be correct or something, right? We don't know, but like some degree of correctness. But certainly in localization. So I think there could be regulation, although also regulation moves very, very slow. I think that probably the first thing that's going to happen is just that there are really you'll see lawsuits and you'll see really, really high impact mistakes being made. I think that's probably where that investment will stem from. As far as like the what parameters, like although I think it is harder to define correctness than is obvious on the surface for a field like localization, software engineering is the same way. When you're in something, you understand what it means to be correct in a way other people don't. So it's like for software, it's not like, oh, it just has to pass tests or something. It's like there's so much that goes into what is like good software that felt impossible to define. And then it turns out like if you spend enough money, you spend enough time, like you can define it and you can, figure out how to make progress towards it. So I honestly don't know enough to spell out every single parameter, but I'm pretty sure you could do it.
Fair enough. Thank you so much, Ben. Okay, next question here. So Giovanna is asking, you said every language and every culture at some point. There are over 7,000 languages in the world, and AI is not available in even a third of them, and very poorly in most of them. Well, this is to be argued. But the interesting question is, what do you see with regards to language of lesser diffusion? And she says, I had hoped that AI would help save them. So in your experience building models, do you see a future where these lesser diffuse languages will be potentially saved through AI, and what is preventing that to happen right now?
Yes, I do actually. One slight correction is like I said that they will be deployed into every language, every culture. I'd not say like in the next year or whatever that it will be great at every culture and every language. I think that I think that LLMs are fundamentally very, very good at language in modeling language in a way that we don't even understand yet. So one thing I think is very interesting, there was this book about this a very, very long time ago, actually 3 years ago when all this started, from the Stephen Wolfram. So he's the founder of Wolfram Alpha. And what the book was is kind of trying to explain, trying to demystify how LMs work. And one of the really interesting tidbits was like, if you think about how hard, like cognitively, we think of a task like writing a poem or writing a story or all these things, are actually really hard, right? And you can get a very, very small, large language model, like a very tiny large language model, to do that. And so then the question is like, how is that possible? And one of the ideas is that like maybe there is almost formula to language that we don't totally understand that makes it easier, that makes it more like addition and subtraction and multiplication, where you can almost do it. It's not the way we teach it. Maybe it doesn't even, maybe it would make sense to us if we knew it, maybe it wouldn't. But maybe there is a sort of, underlying representation there. So I think that's clear. I think that really like it's going to be one of the other barriers here is just like around online learning. So I think that as these data sets for languages are extremely, extremely small. So it needs to either be able to improve online or just be good enough at using all that in context. I would imagine in like some ways it's very, very good at like solving puzzles and solving. So I would actually imagine that it might already now, like some of the biggest models that exist start to be good at this, but I've never tried it. So I think that'd be, if someone does try it, like taking a really low resource model that's probably out of the data distribution and trying to see how it can be used, I think that'd be really amazing.
Thank you so much, Ben. Do you have 1 minute for one more question?
I
And
have
that's it? Okay, thank you. So I will take advantage and ask one more question. I will try to rephrase Danilo's question because I think it's related also to the fact that how we communicate in our industry the value of what we do that we were discussing in the first day. And because you come from outside, I think your opinion is very important because we communicate between each other. Yes, localization is great, cultural nuance, this, that. We convince each other because we know. But when you come from outside, and you also mentioned before, it seems that something needs to break in order for something to take a corrective action. And the question would be, do you think, is there any hope that we could get better at communicating why people need to care about, localizing things correctly or putting guardrails in place because they get a lawsuit? Or, and if so, what would be convincing for you as a software developer, someone with a startup who might be thinking about localizing your products?
Yeah. So I think that actually one of the gaps right now, and that I think is both an extremely valuable opportunity, and also be really interesting, is trying to demonstrate where the gaps are in existing products. So I think that most people building these products, whether they're downstream of OpenAI or whether probably OpenAI themselves, probably have a view that it's sort of good enough now. That's either true or it's not. And I think it takes someone to prove it. So, for example, these benchmarks are just benchmarks Anthropic did on themselves. They've probably saturated these benchmarks internally on stuff they're doing now. So it's probably not as valuable. They're probably looking now for where are they still messing up. And so I think A is like proving that there are serious gaps. And I think obviously everyone in this room is like you can do this right now with ChatGPT. Like where are things where it answers wrong, where it uses the wrong word, so I think that's really the whole thing, proving that there are gaps in the first place. I think unfortunately people just don't it's almost like musical chairs, like everybody just, you were seeing this a little bit with copyright, right? Where there was sort of this like, the music is playing, and no one cares about copyright. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, right, copyright exists and you're supposed to, think about it. And so I think unfortunately it will probably just be something that waits until something happens. But I think if you are positioned for that moment where the something happens, you can, you have that data to prove that there are serious gaps. I think that'll be a useful thing.
Yeah, that's a very good answer. Thank you so much, Ben. I was actually thinking that maybe one way to show, because sometimes we get too technical. It probably happens the same with coding, that we don't know how to communicate these things to people who are outside of our industry.
Yeah.
But if we take an example, if we talk to someone who's trying to localize their product or their website, and we take that text in English and put it in ChatGPT or whatever and translate it into Spanish, and then spot some errors and explain those errors to that person, that
Yeah,
could
exactly.
be like with very very specific examples, like what can go wrong if you don't have your guardrails in place and all that. I think that could be more convincing than just saying, yes, you have to do it because we are great. So
Yeah.
that's a very good answer. Thank you so much, Ben. I will leave you now because, yes, you've been amazing. Thank you so much.
Of course. Yeah.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you.
So it's time to have a break. Thank you, everybody, for being with us. We'll take a short break of 5.5 minutes, and we'll be back at the top of the hour with our next speaker, Emily Diamandopoulou. Thank you so much. So, right at the top of the hour, welcome to the second part of today's session, where we're going to talk more about technology, but this time from insiders. We're going to start with Emily Diamandopoulou. Hi, Emily. Okay, how to present her? She's a Greek Scottish woman. She's passionate about technology. She's the biggest nerd and geek I know in person. And she has been a victim of child abuse when she was a teen, 15 years old. Her father, a nephrologist at one of the most prominent ones in Patras, Greece, made her translate all his talks and presentations at conferences and his papers. So she learned how to translate in a very hands-on way. And now she's a successful businesswoman. She has founded her own language services company with about 10 to 15 employees. And she is also the founder of RIMA, which is a language asset management company. Her bio is very long. Feel free to go ahead and read it. It's fascinating. But I don't want to steal from her time to talk to us. So, Emily, over to you.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much to the think tank team for having me and for organising this very interesting event. I run two companies in Greece, Rhyme and Reason Language Services, which is an LSP, and Rima Language Tech Culture, which focuses, as you said, on language asset management. Above all, though, I'm a translator, always have been, and I will be until this profession no longer exists. My mind has always focused on how can we translate well, preferably. And this is where most of us begun, in the art, the craft, and the science of translation. Over time, though, this question of how to translate well kind of diverged as a concept to include all sorts of technical and operational aspects that at a first glance have nothing to do with translation per se. I started about more than 25 years ago, as Stavroula said, and from the beginning I was fascinated by the technical aspect of translation, how you can try out new tools, see what works, see what doesn't, how you can, it's this whole fascination of exploration. And this gradually turned into a side quest into language technologies, and I actually organise an annual event in Greece called Language Tech Patras, dedicated to this. However, things have changed a lot over the past few years. It's really nice to play with shiny new toys, but up until perhaps 5 or 6 years ago, you were fairly certain that whatever new solution you found would be with you for the foreseeable future. And the market was very happy to sell us such solutions. So as translation technology expanded, we were sold TMSs and QA tools and lots of new shiny toys. And they are useful to a certain point, but they also create dependency. And when you're busy running a company, you rarely stop to ask how much time and money and mental energy is going into tools that kind of started to exist. You first got them just to support your work, not to be the main focus of it. If you do stop and think about it, you might be shocked how over the years our dependency turned into addiction. Some years back, software as a service became the norm. It's convenient, usually affordable, and it was marketed as built specifically for us. So we jumped on board. And this relationship kind of worked for a while. But then came AI and everything exploded. We've got new solutions, new possibilities. And we have to take it all in with the steepest learning curve humanity has ever experienced. And all that under the threat that AI is going to take our jobs. So it's a bit of an existential FOMO scenario. And it's very easy to lose sight of what we actually do. So sometimes it might be a time to step back and go back to the basics. What do we operate in, basically? As Ben Hylak said before me, it's data. It's all about data, translation data, workflow data, metadata. So the real question is perhaps, after years of increasingly building our businesses inside other people's systems, how do we untangle ourselves without stopping our business in order to do it? And as we heard, we might need our data to be freer and transferable. In a small LSP like mine, you have perhaps 2, 3, 5, 10 employees, and these people have roles that were shaped years ago. So there's no spare time to change the whole system. Over the past decade, and we're very curious and we always want to explore new solutions, we've tried so many different systems, project management tools, TMS platforms, communication tools, and each one promised to be the holy grail that would allow us to scale. But the pattern has been more or less the same always. You find a platform that looks promising, you spend 2 or 3 months testing it and migrating data and getting the whole team used to it. And by month 4, you've discovered 3 things it promised to do and it doesn't, and about 20 bugs. By month 6, a new tool appears that claims to solve exactly your problem, the problems that you had with the past one, and the cycle begins again. This loop is corrosive, as you're always scanning the horizon for the real answer to your problems. Maybe it's just the next platform and then everything will be amazing. The cost this entails is not just financial, it's cognitive, as it drains your energy and your ability to plan in the long term. Because the truth nobody puts in their marketing brochure is that scaling a small company does not begin with buying more tools. It begins with having structured data, clear processes, and people who can understand the transformation. And unavoidably, one person, one ring to rule them all, one person willing to hold the whole thing together. The deeper problem, of course, in this is lock-in. Each platform captures your data in its own structure and logic. Your project history is in one place, your client communication in another, your financial records somewhere else. And when you try to leave, you discover that export is technically possible, but it's very painful. So you stay, not because the tool is amazing, but because leaving just costs too much. Lock-in works in several levels at once. There is technical lock-in, so you've got the tool's formats, the limited portability, or operational lock-in with workflows tied into a system, which means that changing tools would mean rebuilding the whole system. Then you have, and this is quite important, emotional lock-in, because people grow attached to a certain way of working, and it's understandable, obviously. And obviously economic lock-in, because migration costs, and then you need retraining, and you've lost so much time doing all this. Each one of these on its own is perhaps manageable. Together, they become a trap. And then the problem is with the speed of change. We don't talk enough about what this does to people. In our industry, the ground has shifted more in the past 3 years than in the previous 15. Machine translation moved from optional to expected. LLMs are now the standard. And the question is no longer whether AI affects us. We heard that before, and it's going to affect us, obviously, but how it reshapes the entire value chain of translation. Every month brings in new magical way of working, but most of these become outdated before they're properly implemented. So inside teams, a new division appears between those who adapt quickly and those who hesitate. Running a small company right now, you can feel like trying to furnish a house that someone's constantly rebuilding around you. So at some point, the question is not what is possible, but what is sustainable, and perhaps scaling down to scale up. Without getting into too much detail, to give you a real world example, which hurt, was we had, for example, one platform that 4 years ago cost for 4,200 euros a year. Then the price the next year for the same features increased to 9,000 and something. And then the price we were asked to pay for it after that for the same features plus some other features we didn't really want was 24,000 euros for the same thing, basically. So at that point, we took a step back and stopped asking, is this the right platform for us, or which platform should we use? And this entails a lot of work looking into different market options and all that. Instead, we asked, what if a platform is not the answer? What if instead of searching for one system that does everything, we build an orchestration layer that connects replaceable components? Could this be safer? So going back to the basics, without fluff, just Lego blocks with AI to help us connect them. So we mapped our operational flows, and this admittedly was the most difficult part. And we looked at the friction points, and we saw that it's not actually translation per se, but it's everything surrounding translation that's time consuming. It shouldn't, in theory, be part of our everyday work. And we decided to start automating that, and not so much translation, obviously, translation as well to a certain extent. But if you start automating the coordination around translation, the whole system becomes lighter, so it's kind of easier to manage. And it's also, on a psychological level, it makes you feel freer because you're not entirely trapped in this SAS lock-in. So I just want to share with you a very, very busy slide, which has the kind of rules of thumb that we followed to make some sense of how to detangle this mess we were in. The first one, and as Ben said, it's going in the future as well, it's going to be all about data. So treat your data as your primary asset. Lock-in is mainly about data. If your data is portable, you're okay. You can change tools. If it's not, you're stuck. In practice, this means that you need open formats, and you also need to separate storage from tooling. So translation memories, term bases, all that should not only live in one tool. You should have copies of everything and versions of everything because, for example, you need to know who did what when for portability, for auditing, for a series of reasons. And then the other thing is, it's not only about the tools, it's about workflows as well. Define workflows, and you have to take some time out to write things down in plain language in the way someone competent person can follow. This is a lifesaver. And you always should prefer tools that have allow you to export. This is a real issue with some platforms because supposedly in theory they allow export, but in practice not so much. So taking all the data you have, you can build a control layer of your own, especially now with we are using Cloud Cowork, which we find very, very useful for this, and with in a combination with some other tools. But the main thing is to, even when you start, even if you subscribe to a platform now, read the contract as if you're planning to leave. You need to know to check the data export clauses, to ensure there are no penalties for data retrieval, and to see what works. We're not married to SaaS platforms. We should be freer in our relationship with them. So yes, you can, obviously you can't do this for, excuse me, for everything. You need to have some things that are platform-based, but try to keep that to kind of the shall we say, the more easier things like email or things like that. But at the same time, store things that are your intellectual property, like your prompts, not only inside your tools, but somewhere else. For us, I mean, we love Markdown files. We find that they are very, very useful in when you want to connect them to different tools. Excuse me. Another thing is that all these systems, platforms, usually they promote deep customization as a very good thing. This is sometimes a trap, excuse me, because every custom automation built inside a platform is actually technical debt that you will pay interest on once you want to leave. The better approach might be to keep the logic in external scripts and in portable files. Excuse me. If you must customize inside a platform, keep a mirror of exactly what you did so you can move away in a couple of days. In general, I think the key rule of thumb is to ask yourself, if this platform, this tool disappeared tomorrow, if it crashed overnight, could I reconstruct this workflow within a week? I think if this is basically the only rule you need, and then from then on, reverse engineer how you would overcome it. Excuse me. So in a nutshell, think in 3 layers, and this is, it took us a while and me a while to actually simplify it in my mind so much, because you never have a whole week to sit and just ponder and think, what's the best solution to this? It's always between other things. And basically it boils down to 3 things. Your tools must be replaceable. Every now and then, if you have time and if the mood so takes you, can try and run a project following a different workflow to see, would that work for us? Logic, any workflows you follow, anything you do should be documented. This is, I think, a huge problem with most companies, not only in our industry, but it's like knowledge living only inside people's brains. And I mean, it's good that it does, but you need to have it documented and reproducible, and data must be portable. If you can't extract it cleanly, you don't own it. Excuse me. Oops. Excuse me. Now, as regards the translation tools we use, we're actually, as an industry, there are quite we're not in too bad a state, because the core file formats are quite portable, like TMX and XLIF and the rest of them. But make sure that you don't have server dependency. There are so many, we're talking with other LSPs, they just have things stored inside their tool, but that is really, it's not the safest way to approach it. I mean, for many, many reasons. And this might not only be the translation memories, but things like QA checks or even things like that are a hidden dependency. You should maintain a tool agnostic QA checklist that any team member can follow, because there are things like, even if you don't leave, stop using a tool, there might be someone who doesn't have access to that tool. You need to have a fallback tech stack just to be on the safe side. And then actually what we saw is that once you have this fallback tech stack, it's actually quite tempting. Like naturally, you start using it in some exceptional cases, and then you actually think, wait a moment, this is actually better. So you have a softer migration. Also, excuse me, you should export your data regularly, and this is a bit of a pain, but it can be done automatically. And actually, again, I was going to mention it later on, but we do love Claude Cowork for things like that. It's a new tool, but it's solved so many of our problems. So moving on to Claude Cowork, it has helped us replace most of our operational stack. Not all, obviously, but it's really good because, first of all, once it's set up correctly, any team member can use it. So what we've done is, for example, we're using it for client briefs, like language combinations, word count estimates, things like that. And then draft quotes and to start the project journey. And this saves so much time. But again, this file routing and versioning, all that is really, really time consuming. And this is really, I mean, I'm very happy with it. But what I would say matters even more is that this is not a black box. It can read every instruction given and adjust every workflow. So it's a more agile approach. And I think perhaps for years and years, we were used to just having workflows imposed on us. So you just feel freer. And going back to what Ben said about how a lot of translation work will vanish and it'll move towards more perhaps cultural consulting or niche projects. I think this is actually the right approach because these legacy TMS systems do not sometimes give you so much the freedom that you need to create new workflows on the spot. And this is what we need now, a much more agile approach as a small company, because this is what we will be called to do, to have a more project by project approach. So you need a mind that understands, an artificial mind that understands your company, but from then on to offer you the possibility of, excuse me, of customizing the way you do things on the fly. But having said all that, I understand and I'm fully aware that Claude is only the current implementation. It's not our system. So again, it's really important to have all your information documented so you can move it out of there as well if needed. Or you can move it, and we also migrated a lot of our stuff from ChatGPT to Claude. So it was quite easy to do because we already had, well, most of the information absolutely ready. Excuse me. So I promised a practical framework. So this is the simplest version. When deciding what to automate, apply 3 tests. Is this task repetitive and predictable? If yes, it's a strong candidate. Intake processing, file namings, status updates, invoice generation, these all follow patterns. Does this task require human judgment? If yes, automate around it, not through it. Quality assessment, editorial choices, these, for us at least, stay manual. But the steps leading up to them and following them can be automated. Excuse me, can someone on the team understand and maintain this automation? This is the criterion that most people overlook. And in essence, it's the most important one because all is good in theory, but if your automation requires a developer to maintain, You have just created a different kind of dependency. The whole point is to achieve sustainability. Automation that creates a second job to monitor, debug, or update is not automation. It's just a new obligation. But if this speech is to be helpful to anyone, I should also mention what has not worked. Expecting the whole team to come enthusiastically on board is naive. When you automate the connective tissue of a small operation, people feel it, roles shift, familiar routines disappear. And that's not just a workflow change, it's an identity shift. So resistance is not irrational, it's human. And I have not found a clean solution to it. Only the slow work of bringing people along kind of one conversation at a time. And after X number of conversations, they are convinced and they see the difference. But where does AI actually earn its place in a boutique LSP? For us, in 3 areas. First is coordination, obviously. It's boring, nobody wants to do it, and we can do more interesting things with our time, basically. The second is structured drafting. It's better than us at this, and again, they're super boring. So perhaps we just followed the what's more boring. This is what should be the main kind of criterion. But then, okay, drafts, excellent, very good, saves you a lot of time, but the value then remains in how a human actually takes responsibility and shapes this. And third, non-translation work. So finance, extremely useful, compliance, administration, the necessary overhead that has nothing to do with language, but takes up so much of our time. In all this, I feel that smaller LSPs, which have leaner teams and flatter structures, are actually at an advantage because they have agility. We can test, adopt, and play around with things in the way that a larger organization cannot due to constraints. So that's our competitive edge. And in this new era of innovate or die, perhaps this is what we should focus on. So, in a nutshell, own your data and your processes. Don't give it away. Automate the coordination, not necessarily the craft. I mean, for me, it's probably actually more useful to start with the non-translation tasks. And then sustainability over sophistication. In some cases, we have found some amazing ways of doing really complex stuff with agents and with really exciting, really makes you want to get your hands dirty with like trying different new things, but this can just lead to burnout. You have to find a balance, and this is a thing that's very specific to each individual team between automating, making your life easier, and keeping your sanity, which is not always the case. The goal is not always to have the most advanced technology. It is control, enough control to do careful work, and then to regain the joy of having more freedom of flexibility. I said at the start that I'm a translator. Everything I've said today, automation, data portability, the orchestration layer, exists for one reason, so that I can keep being one until this job no longer exists. So thank you very much for your time, and I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you so much, Emily. I really enjoyed it, and the audience as well. I'm seeing lots of hands clapping. I was actually looking at one of the things you wrote, that if the system requires a developer to maintain, you have created a different dependency. And I am imagining developers conferences writing the same about translators.
Yeah.
So this is quite a
Revenge.
Yes. We don't have time. We have a few seconds only just to take one question. So I'll just read out quickly the first one. That if you use Claude Cowork for client briefs and code creation, how do you handle data protection? Do you use proprietary servers? What happens with your client's data?
It's a long answer. The short answer is yes, we've used proprietary servers. Excuse me. And access to only very specific files. This is the thing with Claude Cowork. You need to be quite careful what you give it access to. So we started quite experimentally, and yeah, we're still focusing on how to keep things secure as much as possible in our world, because this is completely different conversation. Anyway.
And quickly, the second one, maybe, it's just one. Emily, lots of practical tips. What are your top globalization industry sources for latest tools, trends, news, platforms, technologies as we continue to support our agile language services, businesses, and processes?
Everything. I mean, the reply to this is even longer. I actually follow quite a few people who are not in the localization industry, because especially talking about things like this, about automation, the best examples don't come from the localization industry, obviously. So I would suggest, oh, my mind's stuck. We both follow him, Stavrula. Oh, this is so embarrassing. The guy from MIT.
And oh, Ethan Mollick.
Nathan Mollick,
No,
yeah.
it's not MIT. It's
He's
Berkeley. But
yeah.
yes.
I so failed.
He has got good insights. Thank you so much, Emily. Thank you. We're 2 minutes late, but that's okay. Our audience will excuse us. And we'll go to our next speaker, Istvan Lengyel, who is the founder and CEO of Be Lazy, a middleware platform connecting over 200 translation and content management systems to automate localization workflows. He has a lot of experience in the field and a very long CV. But what I really liked was that he started out also as a translator when he was 16. He translated the whole playbook, the whole rules of a game. He played with his friends because they couldn't speak English, so he wanted to play with them. So he did all the work for them. Istvan, welcome. Thank you so much for talking to us, for sharing your knowledge with us, and looking forward to dig into everything.
Thank you very much, Rola. And thank you all for joining this presentation, which is titled From Prototype to Production. So the background story of this is that in the last couple of months, we have been experimenting a lot with all of the AI-related prototyping tools. And I would like to summarize a little bit of like how we were using it. And I would like to give you some practical examples where this can come handy. So who am I? I mean, I've been in this industry for 26 years, I guess, by now. But I still see that there is always something changing, and you can never be like completely safe here. And I think the only way to prevent this is prevent really getting lost is by innovating and by trying new things. So I've always been on the innovation on the product side in my life. Some of you might know me from MemoQ, which I was a co-founder of, and now I'm with Be Lazy. My background is, even though I translated a lot, my original background is I'm an economist. So I'm like future optimistic here, because simply I would like to refer back to the first presentation of these 3 days, which was about like creating the societal framework around like AI use. So in one way or another, this is the product of people, and the people need to be fed, and there is like a market and there is growth and all of these things. So I'm future optimistic because the world will need to find a problem regardless of translation. Sorry, not problem, a solution to the problem. Excuse me. Um, on the other hand, what I think is that where AI is heading is it's trying to get more and more uh, into our minds. It's trying to get more foothold of everything. So what I'm seeing, and this is my vision of AI as I'm seeing, for example, from Anthropic's improvements, I think they want to become an operating system. And if there is an operating system, there is always an ecosystem to that. So this is when we are thinking about the future. This is how we are looking at it. What I also think is very much relating to Emily's thoughts here is that I don't believe that one system is enough for localization. Now, in the last couple of years, this is something that we are hearing more and more. And I think that there are a couple of enterprise use cases where one TMS is enough. But in the majority of the use cases that we do serve in this industry, this is not enough. If you would like to read up on that, I have published like 4 different articles in this founders blog, and please feel free to read about it. There is a lot about lock-in and capabilities of the different tools. I've also been always preaching that software choices should be evaluated. I used to say 5 years, now it's maybe more often. And software choices also relate to AI and everything. So this component-based approach is always very important. And I was really pleased to hear in Emily's presentation this question, like if this platform disappeared tomorrow, could I reconstruct this workflow within a week? I think that is very much key to what we are also doing. And I'm also not somebody who is like a super expert with AI. I'm not a programmer. My knowledge may have gaps, and please forgive me for that. And finally, I am the founder of Be Lazy, which is a company where we think about like the fragmentation of the localization and trying to turn that into a single operation, which is based around use cases. And this was also like when I was listening to Emily, I was thinking like, oh my God, this could be our manifesto more or less. So thank you very much for this. We have never talked before earlier, so this is also a great encounter here. So let's get a little bit into using of the different AI software development capabilities in localization. What are the things we tried, and what are the things that could define which technology you are using for briefing AI relating to what you want to achieve. So I think one important thing is like, when do you want to run something? Do you want to run a certain operation one-off, which here is like, software migration. You don't do software migration all the time. You do it once, and then you move to the new software. Data retrieval, you just retrieve the data until you get it. So for example, here you will see an example of fetching, for example, the members list of Gala. You can do it regularly. Like, for example, every week you would like to create a report, you would like to create an analysis on all the projects processed in a tool. And you can do things constantly. So for example, whenever there is a new package coming in, you want a tool that unzips the package and imports all of this into, let's say, a TMS. Or you want to create a customer portal which is always on and is able to create certain projects for you, or quotes, or whatever you prefer to have. So the first important thing is like, when is the use case taking place, if it's one-off, regular, or constant. And based on this, there are some other questions to ask. What should start this thing? What should kick off a certain thing? If something is one-off, then you can have some executable scripts, because if it's one-off, you are able to run a piece of tool on your computer, or you are able to run a certain prompt, command line prompt or AI prompt, whichever you prefer. Sometimes you are using different tools that are built into your standard tool set, such as like a Chrome extension. And we are internally using Claude as well quite a lot. And for example, Claude has a Chrome extension, and I'm going to show you why this is useful. And finally, it's also an important thing to ask whether a tool needs to have a user interface. And the user interface, as you can see, can be a command line interface, but it can also be a desktop or a web user interface. And when do you need this? You need it when, for example, you are creating a portal. You need it when you are creating a tool where you are manually uploading certain files and then retrieving the results. This needs user interfaces. When it comes to regular and constant like use cases, what you need to know is that you need to have a place where it runs. It is not going to be your computer because your computer is not always on. So then you cannot use like a local script. And for this, there are app generators, which I'm going to present. Or you can also use something like a cloud function, which can be an Amazon function, a Lambda function, or like an Azure function. This is, at the moment, what I believe the cheapest way to run software in the cloud. And the other thing is that, for example, if it needs to respond to certain actions happening in other tools, to certain actions happening like, receiving an email or something, it needs to be able to receive triggers. And in the world of computing, triggers are best received through a technology called webhook. I'm going to show you this. So there must be a tool that is able to accept webhooks. The good news is that most of this is already available. So let's look at like practical examples now. The first one was scraping the Gala website. So suppose I want to scrape the Gala member companies that start with A and get them in a database. This is something that previously was quite a big task to do, but now it is not that hard. But what's the problem? Gala's website is behind two-factor authentication. So you need to use the Microsoft Authenticator, which means that no tool from the outside is really able to go in there unless you are in there. And this is where the Claude Chrome plugin came in really handy, because I did the login manually, and then I gave access to the information on the website through Claude. So when I imported this, when I did this in the normal Claude user interface, I was not able to achieve the results. When I did this from the Chrome extension, then I was. And we got 28 Gala member companies starting with A. It took a while, actually. Now, I got that into a CSV file, and then I wanted to process these results, something which is not very useful in reality. I wanted to turn it into an XLIF file so that I can import it into MemoQ. So what I prompted Claude here is that it should create a Python script that is first of all changing the country to a country code, and then turns this information into an XLIF with only the company name to be translated, and the rest is information only. And I wanted a Python code. So what many of you probably don't know here is how to run a Python code. Now, this is how you run a Python code. So in order to run it, you need to have an IDE, which is like basically the tool that is running the code. And that one here is the Visual Studio free version that I downloaded. And I also had to install Python prior to doing this. Now, what happened is that I got the code, and actually it was good already at first attempt from Claude. And I just simply created a new file. I copy pasted that as a Python code, and then I started running it. But I prompted the tool to actually allow me to have an argument, which is the name of the file that needs to be converted into this XLIF from that very CSV format. So this is like a data migration, because this is a one-off thing. I don't need to do it all the time, but I may have multiple files, or I may need to repeat this every now and then. So what you can see is that there was an error, obviously, because I didn't give an argument. I didn't give the file name to this tool. But from the command line, as you can see it, hopefully you can see there that I'm typing Python 3 and I'm typing the name of the tool, and I'm also putting in the location there. From the command line, it started running, and what you can see is that it read 28 rows, and it ISO coded the CSV, and it wrote the XLIF out. And then on this next page, what you see is that this was an XLIF that I managed to import into MemoQ without H. So while this is not super useful, I think it is showing you the capabilities that the tools have today in order to produce usable code. And don't forget that this is not hallucinating, because this is code. So the AI can hallucinate, but this is something which is really using the standard coding, and that means that it's going to give you good results. You can do things like this. For example, another thing I was working on was like a migration of a company into XTRF, and like this is a migration task, but it was able to work with both the APIs and the macros that this tool had to be prepared. Triggers may also start from somewhere else. So these tools I quote from the command line. Sometimes you may want to build a Chrome extension or an Outlook extension. One of the use cases we were looking at was an Outlook extension for parsing emails, or a mobile app. There are tools that are for mobile app generation as well. Or also, we've seen that in a lot of cases, Google's tool set, like Google Docs, Google Sheets especially, and other tools are very useful. And Google has the Google App Scripts, which is something that you can install together with your Sheets, and you're able to like run certain operations on that based on the Google App Scripts. And this is very good with, for example, Claude. Now, let's go one step further, because these were like on-demand executions. Now we are looking at functions. What is a function? Function is something that does not have a user interface, that is able to transform data. I'm giving you, for example, a doc file, and I would like to get out an XLIF file. That can be a function, because you just need to pass in the different arguments, and then you are ready. You are able to receive the target. What happens is that functions are really useful for all of the localization engineering tasks, but relatively few tools support calling external functions at certain workflow steps. But most of the tools today available are supporting webhooks, which is like a webhook is for any tool to send a notification that, hey, I'm done with the work I'm doing. This is the difference between an API call that, when you are working with a colleague, for example, you can do API calls to check whether they are done. Really irritating. Every 5 minutes, like, are you done with your work? Are you done with your work? Are you done with your work? And then after a while, the colleague is going to say, yes, I'm done. Well, this is taking up their resources as well. Whereas with webhooks, it's a bit like, please tell me when you are done with your work. And the colleague will come to you immediately once they are done. So let's see how the webhooks are set up in the tools that you want to connect with. I use the webhook site here, which is just one way of testing the webhooks. And here you've got a URL. And the webhook is basically a URL, nothing else. You can see that I'm just copying this over. And this is Belazy's interface, which I'm going to tell that whenever I am dismissing an incoming opportunity, which is one action in the tool, I would like the tool to call out to this webhook. So if opportunity is dismissed, send a post request to this URL. This is all. I set up the webhook, and now it's going to be working. So what we need to do is just test it. And dismissing the opportunity is clicking the little trash icon in the approvals pending on any of the lines. And look, I click on ignore. And the moment I do that, there is a notification going out to this webhook site. Now, this is the logic. You are not going to use the webhook site, but I wanted to show you this because if you're not familiar with this technology, it is one of the key technologies. APIs and webhooks are the key technologies that are allowing systems to talk with each other. This is telling always about a certain action happening. So now let's look a little bit into the web apps, and then we will also get to the MCPs. A web app is very useful if you want a user interface. So when you're building, for example, another use case, which is a customer portal, then you want a user interface. You want it on the web because it's kind of like a standard technology these days, available from your mobile, available from your desktop computer as well. And then you would like to build something like a little bit more complicated with buttons and capabilities and configurations and user roles and things like that. There are many tools that allow you to do this, and this is something that is not so easy to do directly from, for example, Claude. But I will give you a couple of recommendations for tools. Many tools exist, but the main categorization is, do they have their own database and backend included in it, or do they rely on something else? One of the big things that AI brought to me was understanding that tools like Supabase or Firebase, which are like backend as a service, exist. And these are things that have a database, they have like authentication, they have logging, they have a lot of those things that every software product needs to have. The next question is, which programming languages and web frontends do they support? Do they actually go well with your own tech stack? Which user type are they aimed at? Are they for non-experts or are they for programmers? And what and how many LLMs do they use for developing software? Now, there are two main categories, the app builders, which are meant mostly for the non-professional users, and the integrated development environments, which are meant for people with programming experience. I have used Lovable mostly, but I have to say that it has a limited tool set. It is only able to do like React related tools and relies on this Supabase, which I mentioned. Other tools have like give you the full scope of tools all in one. And there are also some tools which are much better at building user interfaces than anything else. Replit, you may have heard about that. Ben mentioned it, that his company is working for them, is providing a cloud-based IDE, which is running and hosting everything. I would say that for a professional developer who wants to go really quickly, probably this is the fastest way to develop tools. And Cursor is something which is a local tool aimed towards AI-driven development. A little bit think about this as if you had a cat tool that was not segmenting and that was not doing like all these old-fashioned things, but it was really helping you use AI in order to produce professional work. So I would like to show you one tool which I built. And the interesting thing is that this was built in less than, no, it's a little bit more than an hour. What you will see is that February the 20th at 4:16, I gave it a specification and I asked the tool, can you implement it? It's about a machine translation service. Now, the specification was already well developed. And one recommendation I would have is that you can use the normal classic chat interfaces to build a good specification before you go into really building tools. This would be my recommendation. So what you can see is that it was already done by 6 o'clock. And this is what it does. It's basically allowing you to have access to different machine translation providers after a login. So what I need to do is that I need to log in. It is capable of having normal users and also administrators. Administrators are the people who are able to tell for which language pair, which machine translation or LLM service is acceptable or recommended. And the normal users can use this in order to put their text to translation. This is something that helps with governance. So if you've got, like, for example, a certain use policy at an organization, something like this will allow the users to not go really rogue around different LLMs and share all the confidential data, but to keep it within the organization. And what you can see is that this is already able to validate different API keys. This is something which is done by the administrator. It has a full activity log. It is able to see who used what service for what amount of words. And it is also able to set up like which different engine is able to work for different languages. So having added the engine for the French-Spanish pair, the DeepL engine for the French-Spanish pair, now it is working for any user. So this is something which is about an hour of experimentation. It is not directly connecting to the tools, but it is more like a user interface draft, but getting it to really work with the tools would take another hour, more or less. It also gives access to another wipe-coded tool, which is a translation order placement portal. And I'm going to show you, because obviously not everything should be done with machine translation. I hope you all agree with that. And like, how can we do something which is very customer oriented, which is like using all the metadata of the customers and so on and so forth. So this is the last demo for today. So here is a little portal, which was also built with Lovable, which allows you to sign up with your Google Microsoft account or your normal email and password combination. And it is able to receive certain files that you want translated. I uploaded this SaaS sales agreement here. And I give it a project name. I mean, think about it as a customer portal. Customer portals are always a bit problematic because many times they are following the logic of the TMS or the business management system rather than the logic that the customer would like to follow. And this makes it really hard for them to use it. And I'm adding some special instructions here, and I'm putting in some custom metadata fields. And this tool is going to actually create the project in Belazy. So this is the only part where I'm using Belazy. Why? Because Belazy is offering a tool set where every part of the tech stack can be replaced. So whichever is your translation management system where you want to create it, if it's MemoQ, if it's Phrase, if it's XTM, if it's Global Link, doesn't matter. Which is the business management system that you would like to have a full copy of it, Plunet, Protemos, XTRF, Google Sheets, whatever, doesn't really matter. And which AI you are using, it's also separating that with XLIF. So this part is actually the user interface. And now what I'm doing is that I created a MemoQ project directly from this. I mean, this can be fully automated. I just wanted to show you that the API call coming from the Lovable portal was the one that generated this so-called opportunity within the Belazy environment. It could generate it in any other environment. And this one was the one that set up the project in MemoQ. What happens next? There is a word count happening. An analysis is happening after having imported the file with the right project template. And what you are seeing here is that we already have the word count. It's 2,322 words per language. The project is being accepted, and as it is being accepted, it's also being created in Plunet in this case. This is not wipe coding, so this is what the platform is doing, and it got into the deliveries pending. So let's have a look at this MemoQ project that was created. And what you will find is that the project was it's still empty. There is no translation yet. So I go into the web interface of MemoQ. I just use MemoQ because that's the one that I know the best, but we could obviously use any other tool here. And what you see is that the analysis was done, the automated actions have taken place. And when I'm opening this document, I can see that it's actually including all of that, which was uploaded by the customer. But the target is yet empty. So what happens now? Now we are going into another wipe-coded tool, which is actually the Belazy AI Hub. What are we thinking? Like, what we are thinking is that XLIF is a great format that can be used in order to put, for example, translation, post-editing, all of these things into the XLIF output of any translation management system. So what we're using here is the translation management system's XLIF output that Belazy was taking out and telling to the AI Hub with a webhook that I have the XLIF, please fetch it and process it the way you want. And how do you want to process it? I mean, that depends very much on the workflow that we have. If the workflow step is translation, I'm going to use OpenAI, and I'm going to use this prompt. If the workflow step is editing, I'm going to use Claude with a different prompt. If the workflow step is quality assurance, I'm going to use a third tool. In this case, it's OpenAI, but I could use anything that has an API. For example, Lexica is a great solution for like looking at quality assurance automation. What can this prompt change? The target text, the match rate, the comments, or what else? These are all things which are fully wipe-coded. So from the portal connection and the MT portal and the AI hub, I actually built like an entire tech stack fully based on wipe coding that is using only APIs here. It is already setting up. It is already set up with other tools. And now if I go back to MemoQ, what I will see is that this translation was already performed. So what you see is that the status has changed to review. And if you look into the document itself, now you will have the target text filled out based on the prompt that you have included. What you can see is that my prompt was not great. So there is even like, here is the corrected translation with all required text preserved, which is not really good. But how can I improve this? By improving only the prompt in the tool itself. And when everything is done, the whole thing is exported back into the original format and goes back into the customer portal for the customer to download. So can you implement a fully automated process? Yes. Can you implement a half automated and half manually like reviewed process? Yes. Can you use the same portal? Absolutely. What's more, cherry on top, the project was also created in Plunet, and it was also completed in Plunet without me doing anything, just using this combination of wipe coding and, I mean, here it was Be Lazy, taking the Plunet part itself. So what you see is that the order history is there. The customer can download the final file. And why did I use this? Because there was a single, simple, unified REST API, because it's the tool that took care of the TMS workflows and BMS workflows. And this is our philosophy here with Be Lazy, like giving a simple, unified access to any tools out there in the translation industry. And what else? An UI-based, metadata-based configuration. If I wanted to replace Plunet with Protemos, if I wanted to replace MemoQ with Crowdin, I could. The question is, are these tools production grade? The good news is that if you are using like an app builder, which was something like Lovable with Supabase, those parts are production grade. If you are using an IDE like Cursor, it is your task to make it production grade. Code quality and security is a big question because obviously you don't know what's in there unless somebody is reviewing it. So it's still best if you have a developer review the tool. They really hate to do that, just the same way as linguists hate to review the AI translated texts. So what you also need to know is that for vibe coding, some of these standard Google and Microsoft tools are harder to get to. Like they have very special APIs. And for example, I failed to automate from a app builder the Google Sheet capabilities. But the good news is that there are other ways to have access to that. So in reality, you can almost do everything. And finally, we didn't talk about MCP, and this is my last thought here, which is something that through code from the web interface, from the local command line. What does MCP do? It is basically, I like to call it objective-oriented programming. It is a wraparound APIs, so it is using the same REST APIs that I was using, but put in such a way that AI knows when to call it and how to call it and what is the purpose. So there is like a description of the purpose here. And what happens is that if you create MCPs, which are not so hard to create, and there are tools out there to create this. Then basically, both from the chat interface and the LLM APIs, the large language models are able to get access to the data that these tools provide. So if I have an MCP to BLazy, I'm reading BLazy tools, BLazy information. If I have an MCP to, I don't know, phrase, then I'm reading phrase information. So what happens is that these are really essential for agentic workflows these days. But in the demos that I showed, there was no agentic workflows. What happens is that previously, a lot of the workflows around AI were built in code. Now, AI is assuming this part. It is trying to take ownership of this so that the developers don't need to build code around AI pipelines. And this is a big change, which is something that happened in the last year. So I hope that I could whet your appetite regarding vibe coding. And please feel free to get in touch with me. Ideas are always welcome. So I would love to hear what your thoughts are. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Istvan. Thank you, thank you. All this knowledge, information. Obviously, the floor to getting into this kind of things, this kind of technology, has lowered so much that everyone can get into it. Just need to be curious, need just to try. But the thing is that the ceiling is still there. So it's actually the distance between the floor and the ceiling is getting larger and larger. And this happens also with translation or anything else, right? So thank you once again. We won't be taking any questions, unfortunately, because we've run out of time. So people are welcome to write directly to you. If they have any questions. Thank you once again. And we are going to move to our next speaker, our very own Marta Nieto Cayuela, a localization quality leader with more than 10 years of experience designing quality programs on both the vendor and client sides. And something you might not know about her, which I will say as she is sharing her presentation, is that she recently had surgery, nothing serious, but after anesthesia, she woke up and started talking in English instead of in her native Spanish and Catalan. She's bilingual, of course. And I remember I had read about that, and it's an interesting trivia that some of you may like, is that during anesthesia, after anesthesia, there is a reduced coordination between Broca's area in the brain, where you have speech production, responsible for speech production, and the Wernicke's area, which is responsible for language comprehension. So this lack of coordination disrupts normal language control. And what happens is, because higher executive functions are still recovering, the brain can't reliably regulate which language is selected. So as a result, it may temporarily default to another already known language. And I find this fascinating, how the brain works. So Marta, thank you so much for this. Thank you so much for being with us today and sharing your knowledge. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Ostavrula, for the introduction. And yes, indeed, that's a true story that happened a month ago. Brain and language, that's a fascinating subject that I'm really interested in. But actually, that's not what I'm here today. So hi, everyone. My name is Marta Nieto Cayuela. And today I want to talk about something that sounds simple, but it isn't at all. It's what does good actually looks like in GenAI content, and not in theory, but in practice. But before I start, I just want to thank Belén and Marina for inviting me today. and actually also like to be member of the think tank, which is like a great selfless initiatives. And also special big thanks to the full AI localization think tank for putting this conference together, because I consider them my colleagues now, and I've seen firsthand how much work and dedication and care and love has gone into these 3 days. So thank you. And speaking of these 3 days, this is the last session of the last day after a very intense conference. So no pressure to end this with a very high note. I'll do my best, I promise, to make it useful. My goal today, it is very simple. I would like you to live with a framework that you can actually apply tomorrow. So what we have, my goal for today is that you end up going home with a way to define quality for your context, a way to evaluate it, and a way to scale it. And why is that my goal for today? Because if I would be asking to each and every one of you to define quality, you would be able to give me a different definition. If I would be asking to you what's good enough, you would be providing a different definition of what actually good enough means for you. So I'm going to spoil it. I'm not going to give just one definition, but the idea is to provide you these tools so that you can make your own and you can make it at home. So, sorry, some tech issues, of course. So today, I'm going to be sharing the working practice. And why am I talking about this? And I'm going to mention to Ben, because Ben said, I have this in written, Ben said, big AI labs don't care about low quality. Well, I do, and I do a lot. This topic matters to me, and that's actually what I think that I may be entitled to speak about it a little, because I have seen quality from both sides. As Stavroula was saying, I have seen quality at the vendor and at the buyer. I have seen it in companies actually prioritizing the AI mandate versus companies prioritizing quality output. I have built quality programs. I have seen them break as well. And I have built AI quality programs when no one was speaking about them, when they were not cool at all. So it is a truth universally acknowledged, as I was saying, that there is no universal definition of quality. And this is not new. We know about the definitions, like the broad definition, the narrow definition that was coined by Lommel, Kobil, Fields, Melby. So when we're talking about quality in AI-generated multilingual content, we are no longer talking about this single universal standard. Quality is contextual, right? What looks good depends on the purpose of the content. It depends on who the user is. What happens if the output is wrong? With GenAI, the expectations have changed. Let's remember that some years ago, we were receiving this feedback about this sounds like machine translation, right? And that was a synonym of subpar quality. Then the mandate, like since ChatGPT was democratized, popularized, operationalized, right? The mandate to embrace more GenAI for the past 2.5-3 years, we have been asked to leverage AI both when it does make sense and when it does not make sense. So expectations have changed indeed towards quality. Nonetheless, paraphrasing Daniel Sebesta from yesterday, he was saying that AI is a generator of possibilities, right? So that's what GenAI does. It generates known patterns, and it's using maybe like training data sets, which may be biased, which might not represent all our cultures, all our languages. And that also, like that culture, that bias, how it actually lands in a region, that's also part of how we are defining quality. So today is no longer enough the content to be accurate. It needs to be natural. It needs to be appropriate. It needs to be trustworthy. Michael Ray, during the panel yesterday, he was saying that translation, it's not just like transferring the text meaning from one language to the other. He said that actually translation is converting one culture to another through language. And I really love that. So the challenge today is not defining quality. In theory, it is benchmarking it and doing it in a scalable and consistent way. And we will be circling back to why am I mentioning scalability and consistency. I think that when we are talking about quality and trying to define quality, it also ties it very well and nicely with our keynote from day one, Maria Serifi, because she talked about how historically truth and expertise are not fixed. They are negotiated. And I think that's what I do every day in the office, right? When I talk and I discuss with my stakeholders the success criteria of their GenAI implementation for localization features and products, right? I negotiate the definition of quality. Also, Maria said that trust is not mechanical, it is constructed. And that's what I think quality management does and what it becomes in this space. The constructor, the architect of the trust by building the processes, the frameworks, and the systems. So why does it matter? Why quality matters? Because it's not just a linguistic concern, it is business. And speaking business is our way to influence it too. Miguel Sepúlveda in his session was mentioning the localization value, right? That the key was to shift from, in our localization narrative, from operational metrics to strategic ones. And that's true. We are just not measuring error rates in quality. What we are measuring is the user trust, the product performance, the brand reputation. We know quality sometimes or often might be seen as a cost, but it's actually a multiplier. It impacts the revenue through the better user experience, to a higher conversion. It builds trust, which drives the retention. Apart from the revenue impact that quality has, at the same time enables the scale. You can enter new markets faster and with more confidence. And finally, it reduces cost. The better you upstream quality, the less rework, the fewer bugs, the faster time to market. So quality and localization are clearly business levers that we need to talk about. For years, we defined quality in very simple way. Let's put it that way, right? Like no errors, fluent text, sounds human. But those definitions might no longer be the right ones for GenAI. And the reason why they might not work is because of the different deployments of AI in localization workflows, because they are based on different use cases. Because how many times have you heard about this context does not have visibility, this context there is no risk, hence we will be using machine translation or GenAI. Maybe it was content that was not to be localized, and now with the GenAI it is. So this no visibility, no risk are making the definition to change, the threshold as well to change. But actually, I don't think it changed the definition of good. So you can have content, and that I'm pretty sure you have plenty of examples. You can have a content with no obvious errors, but that content can be misleading. You can have a very fluent text that it's factually wrong, and you can have a text, all this produced by GenAI, that is linguistically correct, but it's not aligned with the brand, with the culture. And here as well, there are issues that might not be seen. We can be that we can see that they are invisible, like for example, hallucinations, unless you know what you're looking for. So the measure of quality on top of all this that we are discussing, it's also not only about, again, the number of errors or how much that they are to the brand or how much we are not able to see. And it is not just linguists, translators, reviewers matter. It's also how the users experience that content, and that we need to include as well in that definition of quality. So instead of chasing a universal definition, I use something very simple. That's DEM. That is for define, evaluate, and measure. Define. What does good mean for you? Not in theory, in your product, with your risk, for your audience, for your purpose. Then evaluate. Which system works best? The model, the prompt, they evaluate the output of all these combinations that can give to you and what all those iterations produce. And last, measure. Is the output actually meeting the expectations? Can you create your own benchmark through the iterations? It sounds simple, but I think that most organizations might be skipping the first one, which is define. So I'm going to say it again, hoping that we can coin this term, because I think it is very important to do these 3 steps: define, evaluate, and measure. DEM. I need to confess something, which is that I love MQM, and I have been using other quality models and frameworks, and I really like MQM. But what happens today? The issue is not that MQM or traditional metrics are wrong. It is just that they were designed for a different purpose in a different world. A world where content was produced in smaller amounts with a strong human supervision. GenAI has changed that. Is that what we have been discussing these 3 past days? We now can generate thousands, millions, billions of multilingual content at a massive scale. This is the scalability I was talking about. This means that the volume of the content and the potential risks of producing that content has multiplied. And the way to evaluate and the way to approach that evaluation that has worked until today, now it does not scale when we want to have a pulse check on what we are producing. So, embracing machine learning, we have been adopting machine evaluation metrics. I'm not going to spend too long in the next 2 points, but I think that when we talk about the scaling in evaluating GenAI quality, it comes relevant to talk about automatic scores. And here I'm not talking about precision, recall, F1 that we may have for prompts, but I would like to mention some of the most well-known and used metrics that actually we started using for machine translation, right? It might ring a bell to you like Blue, Rouge, CHRF3, Comet, Bird Score, Gamba, X metric, just to mention a few. They are all not the same, so it's important to understand their singularities when you decide to pick one. These metrics, the automated metrics, they are extremely useful. But we need to be very clear about what they do, what they can and what they can't. And they can measure similarity. But quality, as we have been saying, it's much broader than that. So when we are looking into those layers and dimensions of what quality means, right? Like the user perception, the culture, all these nuances, these metrics, they struggled with this. They struggled with context. They might be missing hallucination, as well as other GenAI pitfalls, because these were not made for GenAI. They were not creating to evaluate GenAI content. And actually, in the past 3 years, we have seen new metrics coming in, like X metric, but actually it was not born for GenAI evaluation. So these metrics, they have some misses, but they are great for scaling because they give us a signal, but not the full picture. So how can we get that full picture? Well, that's the human evaluation. And funny enough, I think that Alexander Pisarik on Monday, he was posting in LinkedIn something about how we are now adding the human as a qualifier. And when I was preparing this, I realized that yes, I just keep on adding the human. But here, like the human evaluation part, like we see, and we know these approaches like the LQA, rating, assessment, direct assessment, ranking. Here, I'll just summarize by saying human evaluation, we understand the nuances, but we do not scale. So, okay, if machines don't work and humans don't scale, what works? What actually works, I think it's a combination, right? Machine metrics, automated metrics are automatic signals that allow us to scale and triage, and human evaluation provide us with the depth, with the knowledge. That's what builds the trust. A hybrid evaluation model allows us to cover more content with automated scoring and targeting samples with the human expertise. And those insights are the ones that will help us to build the guardrails, to iterate, to monitor, and to measure. And this is just not me. I'm going to be stealing a quote from Daniel Sebesta from yesterday. He said, quality is a combination of evaluation and judgment. And I couldn't agree more because fully on it. So what does the research say? I have been saying I'm a practitioner, I'm not a researcher, but I follow this very closely. If we look at recent research, there is a consistent pattern. First, it says that the automatic metrics, they are not enough, especially when you want to get like fine-grained information and evaluation, even for the most advanced models. Second, they say that human-informed evaluation is essential, especially when you want to get the nuance and domain specific. And this actually is coming from a paper on using the MQM model for chat and chatbots evaluation. And the third thing to remember here about what research says is that the most effective approaches are hybrid, that combining the automatic signals with the human judgment and the context awareness is the best. And I was very happy to learn this. So what we are seeing in practice is strongly aligned with what research is telling us. And actually, if you want to follow this closely with the WMT shared task that happens on a yearly basis, I think it's a good pulse check to try to understand where we stand regarding evaluation. So one thing is clear, evaluation needs to be contextual and multidimensional. And if you ask me, the human evaluation needs to happen and it is critical and it will still be critical because, well, natural language is human and humans can bring this memory, this emotion, intuition, lived experience that we were talking during day one. And I will add, they represent the user too because we are users. So expertise is not just technical, it's interpretative, and as much as I would like, and I try to quantify quality and make it objective, language is alive. That's the added value of our human evaluation. But how does that actually look? You may ask, okay, how do I implement a hybrid approach to evaluate GenAI quality at the scale? This is my take. My take is use automated scoring to get your signal to all your content. And we see that contents multiply 2 times, 3 times every year, but still you can run this to all that content, as much content as you need. And then use thresholds to route and triage content to do a sample of your towards human evaluation. Now that you have that sample, depending on the time you have, the in-depth you want to do your evaluation, the maturity and complexity of your processes, I would encourage to use what I might be calling modular AI quality evaluation framework. The good thing is that each of these models that I'm going to be sharing now, they can be used in isolation or in aggregation, depending on, as I said, the complexity and maturity of your organization or your processes or even your needs. We will now see an example for the details, but let me mention very quickly. The first is a holistic, that's an overview of the quality. Replies to the question like, is this good enough for my expectations? Second is the granular, which is you can use the LQA of your preference is to understand the severities, the categories, and also like to extract the insights for potential improvements. And the third is the featureable model, which is 100% customizable, and you can use binary, yes, no, Boolean, true, false, rating to get evaluators to respond to your specific success criteria. Of course, to gain confidence, I would say correlate this to pieces of data so that actually you can gain more confidence into your automated scoring, which will allow you to collect more data and more quality information about all the content that you are producing. So that example, what does it look like? For example, for my holistic, I would like to be using a scale 1 to 5 or 1 to 10. And what I am going to be taking is the average of all those scores of the different segments, different paragraphs, different text that I am evaluating. And then with the average score and the percentage of past score, which I have defined as a past score, that's how I can get the data on quality. That would be like the most simple, basic, quick. You can even like do it in a day for a sample and get to your stakeholders or even for yourself. Then you can use as a threshold even that scalar rating, like whatever it's not a pass, to actually go into the granular part of it and trying to understand why those items that were marked as fail, they're actually not meeting the expectations. And then last but not least, this featureable model that I was proposing, you can get a metric which is like the out of the total percent, the out of the total percentage of the items that you are evaluating. And you can ask things as the readiness, the cultural relevance, if there is like offensive context, the bias, the safety, if it's good for gender neutrality, or even about the legal compliance that we see a lot. So it's important to note that these scores and frameworks were originally designed to evaluate the output. However, when we complete an evaluation, we realize that most of the insights requires to be fixed at different layers, not just at the output level. And it's curious because root cause analysis of GenAI issues is completely different from a human or machine translation, which means that the evaluation, the actions, and the loop is not over. So this leads to another quick concept, which is GenAI quality is multi-layered. We have been focusing on the output layer a lot so far. And even if we have only been speaking about multilingual output, monolingual output will also require a section. So based on the insights of the output evaluation, we influence the prompt layer, and we will need to evaluate 2-3 iterations. And something that it is very important that we do not forget is the model layer, which is like which model we use, which version we are using. And localization does not always have a say into those decisions about which model, what version we are using. So it is key that we evaluate, that our frameworks can evaluate that, so that we can expand and include the layers and support AI teams, product teams into making those decisions, because eventually that's localization, so that we should be channeling and recommending and establishing the best practices. Because something it is very clear, if the same error appears 1,000 times, it's not an output problem, it is a system problem. So we need to move from evaluating output to evaluate systems. So if I had to summarize what good looks like today, I would say that good is contextual, it's multidimensional, it's multi-layer, and it's adaptive. And yes, I know it's not a typo. Risk appears twice because it's twice as important. I think that was actually one of the insights that both Coral and Veronica said during the panel on AI trust governance and ethics. So the question is not, is this good? So maybe the question is this good enough for this risk? To evaluate GenAI, we need frameworks that go beyond the correctness, right? That capture the nuances, that are flexible enough to be used in different layers. So that's why it's so important, I think, of those hybrid evaluation frameworks that combine the automated metrics on the one hand and the human evaluation on the other hand, because we want to cover the full content generation orchestration from model selection to output evaluation. So good is contextual. We define good. You need to define good because good is constructed, is negotiated, and it's interpreted. Very important that in order to build trust on the content you produce, hybrid frameworks can give it to you, with machines allowing you to scale while we, humans, add the value and the governance to it. Thank you very much.
Moltes gràcies, Marta. Espectacular, com diuen en el chat. Thank you so much. Thank you. Unfortunately, we have no time for questions and answers, but please do connect with Marta on LinkedIn, and she'll be very, very happy to talk to you more about any questions you may have. Now, I'll hand over to Belen to say some final words and to close this amazing conference. Thank you so much on my part, and over to you, Belen.
Thank you so much, everyone. I'm about to cry a little bit because I'm really reading all the amazing feedback on the chat. It means so much to us. We've put a lot of work and effort, volunteer work. We are not sponsored. We are not making any money out of this. So it's just the willingness to share knowledge with all the community to really help to do something really valuable that is without hidden agendas, without commercial constraints, as I said in the first day. So thank you so much. We've seen hundreds of people joining in Zoom, some dozens joining in YouTube, and then hundreds of people rewatching the first 2 days already. So we couldn't be happier about the impact of this conference. Thank you so much. Just a couple of reminders. We will be sharing all the recordings in YouTube. You have them already for day 1 and day 2. Day 3 will be automatically uploaded, so you will be able to rewatch everything. I know it's been a lot of knowledge to be processed, so you will be able to watch again, take notes, take screenshots, and learn more through the coming days. We will also be publishing conference reports next week on the think tank website, so stay tuned for that as well with our main takeaways. And yes, please keep following us on social media, keep following us on LinkedIn. We already have some more content in the pipeline for the next few weeks. We will take a break this week to recover from the conference. And just one last thing, we really want to hear your feedback, because I guess now we have no other way but to repeat this next year, seeing the good feedback that we received in these few days. So please share your feedback about the conference, if you like it, what you liked the most, what you didn't like, so that next time hopefully it can be better. And yes, and we will be waiting to hear from you. Also connect with us on LinkedIn, share us your questions through the Ask the Think Tank form on our website, and let's keep sharing knowledge and building the future together, whatever form or shape it will take, but it will be hopeful. Thank you so much, and see you around. Have a lovely weekend. Bye.